So yesterday we did take a look at the basic structure of an HL7 message, right? And we did see how to read an HL7 message at a very high level. We understood that HL7 message contains segments, and each segment has its own name, which is a three-letter acronym with which the segment name begins with. And we also understood that these acronyms will help us to understand what kind of data can be present within that particular segment, right? So yesterday we did take a look at a concept on how do we separate the fields within the segment. We understood that the pipes that are there within a segment will help us to differentiate or separate each field or one field from another field. Whatever is held between two pipes is called as field, and each field has its own sequence. So in PID, this is the blank field that you're seeing here is sequence number 1, and then next we have sequence number 2, 3, 4, 5, right, and so on. So let's talk about components today, because components are the one which will help us to look at the data in a little bit granular manner. So let's understand how to read or how to understand how to navigate through an HL7 message. How to read an HL7 message when we have components in a certain field. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. And we'll also take a look at what are the various trigger events that we have, and start taking a look at detailed HL7 message structure. Okay, so this was the example that we were looking at yesterday, and we understood that every HL7 message segment has fields, and whatever is held between two pipes is called a field. Now, when you look at certain data elements, you may see that data is further broken down and they are separated with the help of this symbol called as caret, right? So what does that mean? And in a few fields, we don't see that at all, right? If you look at date of birth, if you look at gender, if you look at just the set ID, we are not seeing these caret symbols in those fields. But in a few fields, we are seeing those caret symbols. So what does that actually mean? So apparently what happens that whenever a segment is created or whenever a segment is designed, we put certain data elements within certain fields, and that is the fixed placeholder for that particular data element. For example, for name, we have PID 5. For date of birth, we have PID 7. For gender, we have PID 8. For address, we have PID 11, and so on. So there are around 40 fields for PID segment. Now, if you look at name is certain kind of field where it's not just one single word. Name contains multiple components like first name, last name, middle initial, suffix. You may have suffixes like junior, senior, and you may have prefixes like doctor or something else, right? So name is kind of data element where we may have multiple components, and it is needed to be broken down into those multiple components. So wherever there is a possibility of breaking down the data element further into multiple components, HL7 has done that work for you. Okay, so the standard says if you have multiple components, those components has to be separated from each other with the help of caret symbol. And again, each component has its own sequence. This is called component number 1. This is called component number 2, component number 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. How do we know, or how do we determine how many number of components each field can have? That purely depends upon the data type. So when we actually touch the data types topic, we'll get a little more deeper into how can we determine how many number of components each field has. But for now, all that we need to understand and remember is that in case if a data element is broken down, we need to separate them with the help of caret symbol. And each of the components has its sequence starting from 1. So in case if I need to indicate patient's last name or patient's first name, or if I need to read what is the patient last name and patient first name within the HL7 message, then I would read this way. So I'd call out the segment name. And then yesterday we saw that each field has its own position. So PID 5 is patient name. We all know that from yesterday's session. Now, if I want to specifically look at last name, not just the name, but the last name or but the first name, then I should read through the components of that particular field. So this is component number 1. Component number 1 indicates last name. Then you have PID 5.2, which will indicate first name of the patient. Then we have PID 5.3, which will tell middle initial. Then we have PID 5.4, which will tell you what is the prefix and suffix and so on, right? So this will go on. There are around 15 components within PID 5. How many number of components are there? How do you determine how many number of components are there? That all we'll take a look at down the line. As I said, it is purely dependent upon the data type that is associated with this field. So we'll take a look at that in the future. So whenever you read through the HL7 message, this is the basic. You at least need to know how to read or how to call out a segment name, how to call out a field number, how to call out a component number, and how to read through the HL7 message. Okay. One more important point is if you do not have that particular data point or data element, then you should leave that field or component blank. Now, PID 4 is dedicated for alternate medical record number. And we can see that PID 4 field is blank here, which means the data that is captured in the front end doesn't or did not capture or did not create an alternate medical record number. So when there is no data present, we leave that field as blank. We don't move the data from another element into this another field into this field. Meaning, as I have PID 4 as blank here, I will not put patient name in PID 4. Right, yesterday we looked at an example that there is a rack and one of the compartment is dedicated for putting trousers. If you do not have trousers, you leave that particular compartment blank. Just because it is empty, it doesn't mean that you put some other t-shirts or some other shirts into that particular compartment, right? So in the same way, in case if a field is blank for, in case if you don't have a data element captured or entered or saved in the real time in the front end application, we leave that field blank. We don't enter that information there. This same logic applies for components as well. In case components are empty, let's say that patient's first name and last name are given, but patient did not provide his middle initial. So PID 5.3 is dedicated for middle initial. As we do not have middle initial, we will leave that particular field as blank. Now, another question that usually comes up, do we need to show all the blank fields or components? In case of components, it's okay even if you don't show. In case of fields as well, it's okay even if you don't show all the fields in the segment. Now, if you look at this particular HL7 message, I think we have around 17 or 18 fields here. The actual PID segment has 40 fields. So apparently, if you do not have data after certain field, then you can leave all of those fields as blank. I mean, it's okay even if you don't show the fields if you do not have data, right? But until the point where you have the data, all the fields has to be populated. Okay, so this is how you go ahead and read the HL7 message at a very high level, at least till field and component level. Now, how do we use or how do we read through tildes if we see in the message? We'll look at that with an example when we go through the actual HL7 message structure in detail. We'll also talk about subcomponents like ampersand and all, as and when we progress through the training session. Okay, so any questions in reading the HL7 message?
Hey, Dixon. So, just I want to curious, do
Yeah,
we
Jack.
have to remember every message segment even when we writing the HL7 message? Like, do we have to remember everything by heart? Like the sending, the
Mhm.
receiving, and then patient name, everything.
Not everything, but at least few fields. So uh, I have highlighted the fields that are required to be known.
Oh, okay.
Um, so today we will take a look at least the MSH segment in detail. So I will present a PDF. In that PDF, I have highlighted the fields. So at least those fields has to be remembered. Not from all the segments, but from few of the particular segments. I will tell you after completing all the messages, what segments you need to at least learn as a basic, as part of your interface profile.
Okay. Thank you, Dixon.
Yep, no problem.
So, Dixon, some of the fields are required and most of the fields are optional. Is that
Right.
how it is standards? Okay.
Yes. Yes. Any other questions from anyone? All right. So let us go ahead and take a look at how HL7 messaging is a event-based messaging methodology. So from yesterday's session, we understood that HL7 works purely based on a concept called as trigger event. So what is trigger event? Apparently, the standard definition says that the action or the event that is happening in the real world, if that particular event creates a necessity for the data to be sent from one system to another, such events are called as trigger events, right? Let's say when you look at the hospital workflow, there are series of events that are happening. So yesterday I told you that when patient arrives at the receptionist desk, they will ask patient for their basic details if patient is visiting for the first time. Or if he has already been to the hospital, they will change if there is any change that has to be made to his existing information, like phone number or address or email address, if something has to be changed. Apparently, there is uh, something going on which we call as an event, right? So if the patient is getting registered for the first time, then all the patient details are captured and they save the patient details to the database, right? So they will basically enter all the data in the PM application and click on save. And the moment they click on save, that concludes that particular event. Registration of patient is done. All right. In the same way, there are other series of events that will happen within the hospital workflow. So from a hospital workflow, we saw that after demographics is done, we'll go ahead and schedule an appointment for the patient. We, in the sense, the hospital staff will go ahead and create an appointment for the patient. So creating an appointment is one event. Similarly, after creating an appointment, patient visits the doctor. So patient discussing with doctor is called as an encounter. So encounter is an event. Then doctor will place an order, and that order information has to be sent, or basically doctor is placing an order so that lab can receive that order and perform the test. So that is called as placing an order is another event. Now the lab results back the data, so that is another event. In this way, from the point when the patient arrives into the hospital till he leaves, there are series of events that are happening. Okay, so that is the base. events will keep on occurring, whether the patient is inpatient or outpatient. So few of these events will need the data to be sent from one system to another. So in these series of events that we have seen just now, whenever a patient is registered, data to be sent from PM system to EHR system. When an order is generated or when doctor places an order in the EHR system, this order has to be sent out from EHR to the lab so that lab will have that information and patient's test can be performed. Right. So as these events are demanding for the data to be sent from one system to another, these kind of events are called as trigger events because they are triggering the data from one point to another point. And HL7 works basically on this particular principle. All right. Just give me 1 minute, guys. Hey, hello. Sorry about that. I had someone calling me. Sorry about that. All right. So all series of events that are happening within the hospital will demand the data to be sent from one system to another system. So there may be few events which will not demand this data to be sent. So for example, if we talk about capturing vital information, right? Whenever patient visits the doctor, the initial checkup or at the initial point, the patient will be checked with his blood pressure. They will check his sugar levels, or they will check their height, weight, and some basic stuff, right? So this data is saved to the EHR system. Is it necessary to send this data from EHR system to another system? Usually it is not. So there are events which do not demand for the data to be sent from one system to another. So such kind of events are not called as trigger events. So if there is an event which is demanding for the data to be sent from one system to another, are called as trigger events. Okay, so that is the basic principle based on which HL7 works. Now let us go ahead and divide and see how do we call out these, or what names do these trigger events have in real-time HL7 message. Because we know that patient is being registered is an event, appointment being created is an event, order being placed is an event, or result being received is an event. But these are the names that we generally call in our own language. But HL7 has its own language, right? HL7 follows its own naming conventions for each of these events. So we need to understand what are the terms that we have in the form of HL7 to represent these events and all. So if you look at the hospital workflow, it can be broadly categorized into a registration at a very high level, all the registration related events like patient being registered, patient's data being updated, and if you talk about patient's admissions, patient discharges, all of those things will fall under registration bucket. And if you look at second one is the appointment scheduling. So creation of appointment, modification of appointment, cancellation, deletion, or anything that is related to the appointment will fall under appointment schedule. Then you have labs, placing orders, receiving results, and all will be under labs. And then you have charges. So charges are nothing but the amount that is incurred for the treatment that is taken by the patient. So anything that is related to charges um, will be indicated or will be falling under the charges bucket. And then you have pharmacies and insurances. So usually not every clinic or hospital would use HL7 messaging for pharmacies and insurances. We have two other uh, methodologies or standards which will be used for that. Our main focus will be primarily on these four major categories that you're seeing right here, right? So we will, because these are the four events or four categories which will be using HL7 primarily, and we will explore more. But as I said, these are the terms that we use in general, right? So let us take a look at how these are represented in terms of HL7. So in terms of HL7, registration, scheduling, labs, and charges. So registration is indicated or represented with a three-letter acronym again. It is called as ADT, and this particular ADT is called as a message code. Okay, so ADT stands for admit, discharge, and transfer. So any event that is happening pertaining to admit, discharge, or transfer will be given this name or will be represented with this name called ADT. Okay, if you look at appointment schedule, it will be represented with the help of a term called SIU or an acronym called SIU. SIU stands for scheduling information unsolicited. And then you have labs. Labs are represented with the help of ORM, ORU. So ORM stands for observation request message. ORU stands for observation result unsolicited. And then you have charges. Charges stands for detailed financial transaction. Okay, now these are called as message codes, as I just said. How many message codes you have? You have many message codes depending on the hospital workflow. But why we are taking a look at only few of them? Because these are the most frequent ones that will be used. 70% of your implementations will have these message codes. Okay, now that being said, I just told you that every message code that you're seeing will account for a lot of events that are happening. So if you talk about ADTs, we have patient getting registered. That is one event. Let's say that patient is getting his data updated, existing data getting updated. That is another event, right? Patient being admitted, that is one event. Patient being discharged, that is another event. So ADT itself has many events under it, right? So let's take a quick look at what all, not everything can be known or everything can be seen. So only few of the events can be known. So let's take a look at them. So we have registration. Under registration, the most common events that we'll see is patient being registered or getting his existing data getting updated. We have other events like merging, admission, uh, uh, transfer of the patient. There are many other events, but we are just taking a look at common events so that we can get the basic idea of how this thing works. Next, you have appointment schedule. As part of appointments, you have three main events, which are creating a new appointment, updating existing appointment, which is nothing but updating the existing appointment information, like changing the appointment from one status to another, like from booked to checked in or booked to walked in, something like that. So we'll talk about that flow down the line when we take a look at appointment message structure. Then you have delete an appointment. So deleting an appointment is nothing but canceling an appointment. The reason why I wrote the term delete there is to specifically tell you that we usually never delete the data from the healthcare systems. Okay, all the HR, PM, HI systems, if something has to be deleted, they mark it as archived and still have the data within the database. You may not see it in the front end, But behind the scenes in the backend database, we usually never delete the data because of some compliance related aspects. And they have to retain that information for compliance related, as well as to have data trial of what happened to certain data and why it is not showing up in the front end or something like that. So usually we cancel an appointment. When we cancel an appointment, we mark it as cancelled, but data is still there in the system. Next, you have charges. Charges are basically has one event, which is to represent the charge data. Then you have labs. Within labs, you have orders. Orders will be used. Orders is one kind of event within the lab section, and receiving the results is another event within the lab section. So in this way, we have many trigger events that will be there as part of each category that we looked at. Now, these are again our general terms. Let's go ahead and take a look at how these are represented in terms of HL7 in the real world. Or if you talk specifically about HL7 messaging, how do we show these events? Let's take a look at that. So we just looked at ADT. ADT has two events is what we have seen. Has many events, but from that we have looked at only two events as part of ADT message code. So a new patient registration can be represented either with A04 or A28. Okay, and then you have update of existing patient information that can be represented with trigger event called A08 or A31. Okay, so these are called as trigger events. This one is called as message code. These are called as trigger events. So when you actually look at an HL7 message, we have a field in the HL7 message called message type. Okay, this message type is a combination of message code plus trigger event. Okay, so this will tell us what message type we are dealing with. So it will apparently tell you, basically it is the name of the message. If you have to identify some person, they will have a name, right? In the same way, every HL7 message has its own name called, and it is represented in a field called message type. So if you're looking at this HL7 message, if you see here in one of the fields, we have this ADT A04. So ADT is message code and A04 is the event type. So by looking at this field, I can tell what kind of message I am looking at. So ADT is for admit, discharge, and transfer. A04 is the event which is used to register a new patient information. So I am looking at an HL7 message which is actually transmitting new patient information from one system to another. So by looking at the message type, you will always be able to tell what kind of message you are dealing with. Okay, so that is how we will go ahead and get to know what message we are working on and what is the message type we are looking at. So at any given point, if you have to read through an HL7 message, first thing that we usually do is take a look at the message type to determine what kind of message type we are working with. Okay. So let us continue looking at other events as well. So then we have SIU. In SIU, we know that we just saw that we have new appointments. So new appointments are indicated or represented with trigger event S12. Updated appointments or update of existing appointment information will be represented with S14. And then we have S15, which is used for representing cancellation of an appointment. Then we have DFT, which is detailed financial transaction, basically the charge related data. It has only one event, which is called as PO3. And then you have ORM, which is used for observation request message. Basically, what does it mean? Doctor is requesting for an observation. That is why it is called as observation request message. Apparently, it's a lab order that doctor is placing in the EHR system. So it has one event called O01. then lab system will go ahead and send the result back to the EHR system, right? So that is represented with ORU, and ORU stands for observation request unsolicited. It has one event which is called as R01, which is actually representing the result information back to you. Okay. So now the question comes up, do we need to know all the message types? Do we need to know all the message codes and all the events that we have? No, it is not necessary. Even I don't know what all message types are present because there are more than 50 message types in HL7, more than 80 events that are part of the HL7 specification, right? So you usually learn it as in when you go through, as in when you progress through your career. Based on the requirement or based on the real-time implementations, you may be introduced to new kinds of events. Let's say if I want to transact immunization information, we have a different message code called as VXU, okay, which actually transmits the vaccination data from one system to another in case if it has to be sent over. Okay, similarly, if you have some waveform of data that has to be transacted like ECG or EKG, then we have another message type called as WAV. So in this way, there are different message codes. So based on the requirement, you will need to explore what message type is present within HL7 specification for your specific use case. But to start with, these are the basics that we need to know. At least if you know these basic message types, then it would help you a lot in your real-time HL7 interface implementations. Okay, so let us go ahead and start taking a look at, so what we are going to do is we are going to take a look at each message type and what is the structure of each message type. Now that we know that there are specific message types for every event that are happening, we'll take a look at what all segments that are involved in each one of these message types, and we will take a deeper dive into what all fields are present within those segments, and we'll also talk about each field functionally, how do we capture them and how do we transact them in the real-time HL7 message. Now, one question that often comes up is when we look at the HL7 message, do we read all the messages one by one through, let's say, I don't know what is this field number, right? So I have to read through the fields in detail. So I have to go and see this is field number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 is where I have my patient's date of birth. And if you look at this particular segment, here you have some date information. Basically, this will be PID for PV1 44 or 45, where you send the admit date and time on discharge date and time. Do I really know that this is in field number 44? How do I determine that? One way is for me to go ahead and read through all the fields. So usually what we do is to validate whether the data is in correct field or not, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. So we will count through all the fields to determine whether it is present in the correct field or not. Right? It is supposed to be in PID 44, but if it isn't, but in order to validate that, the only choice is to go ahead and read through the field numbers and determine whether that is in the correct field or not. Is there an easiest way? Yes, we have special tools which will actually help us to go ahead and break down the HL7 message structure and show it to us in a systematic manner. I will show that tool once we complete the HL7 message structure, at least for one message type. But in the beginning, if you are very new to HL7, I would recommend reading through the fields. That would help you to memorize and determine or memorize and by heart which field is present in which particular field. Which data element is present in which particular field. That's how usually people learn to memorize at least few of the data elements. Memorizing all of them is impossible, and no one would ask you for that as well. And it is not a crime if you don't know what data element is present in which field. At least certain fields to be known. Let's say being an HL7 analyst, you should know where do we send patient name? Where do we send patient's date of birth at least? So that minimum is expected being an HL7 analyst. So uh, we will take a look at what are the important fields that you need to remember down the line. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at first message type, which is nothing but ADT message types, at least, I mean, not specifically events. We'll take a generic look at an ADT message structure to understand what all segments are involved in an ADT message structure, and we'll take a look at each segment in detail. So any questions before we proceed? All right. I'm not hearing anything, so let us jump on to the message structure. Can you all see the PDF that I'm presenting? Can someone confirm, please? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So we'll start exploring ADT A04 or A08, basically an ADT message type. We'll take a look at what all segments are involved. Now, apparently, as per HL7 specification, who tells us what is the data structure of an HL7 ADT message? So basically, HL7 has released their specification documents. We'll take a look at that down the line. But HL7 will guide and tell you what is the structure of an ADT message. What is the structure of an SIO message? What is the structure of a DFT message? So so HL7 specifications is going to guide us in that matter. What we are going to take a look at is not the standard HL7 structure, but the generic structure that is used in real time. Okay. So for now, just understand that we are looking at the message structure from a real-time project perspective. Okay, what is HL7 specification and all that we will take a look at as and when we progress through the training. So when you look at an ADT message, usually these are the segments that are involved in an ADT message. So you'll have an message segment representing message segment header. What does that mean? We'll take a look at that. You will have EVN segment, which is nothing but an event segment. You'll have PID, patient identification segment. You'll have patient visit segment. You'll have GT1, guarantor segment, and there will be an insurance segment. These are the common segments. Does it mean that we need to send all the segments? Not necessary. You may be having few messages, or you may see real-time few examples like without IN1 segment, or without all these three segments being there in the message. You may see a message only with MSH, EVN, and PID. At times, you may see a message only with MSH and PID, right? So it is not a rule that all the segments has to be there. You may be seeing only few of the segments in an ADT message, but these are the common segments that we usually come across when we look at an ADT message, right? So let us go ahead and take a deep dive into each one of these segments and understand what are the fields that we have in each one of these segments. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with a message, and slowly we'll progress with other segments as well. So if you look at a message segment, a message stands for message segment header. So as the name itself suggests, it is a header segment. Apparently, it is used to go ahead and transact the metadata or high-level information about the message. Let's say if you look at a textbook or any novel or any book, usually you'll have some index, right? That index will tell us or give you a high-level overview of what that book is all about, right? So a message is that kind of index for the message. It will tell you who is sending the message, who is receiving the message, at what time the message got generated, and it will also tell you what is the message that you're dealing with, what is the name of the message that you're dealing with, and few other important high-level information about the message will be transacted in an message segment. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what all fields we have in the message segment. Before that, we need to understand the structure of this particular table that we are looking at. So every HL7 message segment will usually be represented in a tabular format. So those tables would contain what is the sequence number that we are talking about. So first column will tell you which particular field that you are looking at. Then the second column is nothing but the length column. So this will tell you how many number of characters are allowed in a certain field. So if you have a number, then you have to respect that number. If you do not have a number, and if you have it as 0, then you can go ahead and send, you can go ahead and send any number of characters within that particular field. So if you look at a message 10 here, it says you can send 199 characters. So that's the maximum limit or maximum number of characters you can transact in a message 10. But if you look at a message 5, 6, 8, 7, and all, these all have 0. It means that you can go ahead and send as many number of characters as you want. There is no limitation. Next column that you have is DT, which stands for data type. So we are going to have 2 separate sessions on data type. We will talk more about data type at that point of time. So we will not touch this field for now. But one thing that we need to understand at this point is that every field has its own data type. And that data type is also represented within that field. Next, you have optionality, or usually we call it as, optionality. And that will tell us whether a certain field is a required field or an optional field. Okay, so we can see here that we have R representing that this field is required. So whenever you have any field represented as required, then you need to send that data in the HL7 message for sure. You cannot have that field blank. But if you have a field represented as O, which is optional, it means that it is okay even if you don't have data within that field being transacted. You can leave the field blank if you don't have the data. All right. So in the optionality column, you have few other representations as well. R stands for required. Then you have O, which stands for optional. Then you have something called as C, which is called as conditionally required. Apparently, this conditionally required would represent that this field data is required based on certain conditions. Those may be HL7 specification related conditions, or those may be real-time functional scenarios or real-time functional related requirements. Then you have something called as B, which stands for backward compatibility. Then you have something called as W, which is called as withdrawn. So we have various HL7 specifications, right? We have 2.3, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, and so on. So whenever we are progressing into higher versions, you will see that few fields will be withdrawn, which means when a field is marked as withdrawn, you are not supposed to use that field anymore. Okay, so if something is marked as withdrawn, we should not go ahead and send any data within those particular fields. Okay, and then you have something called as backward compatibility. So before a field is being withdrawn, usually it is marked as B or retained for backward compatibility, at least for 2 versions of it. Okay, so if you see some field as with the representation of B, it means that in the upcoming future versions, that field will be withdrawn for sure. And that has been retained in the current specification for backward compatibility purposes. Okay, as and when we progress through the structure of the HL7 message, you may be seeing few with B, you may be seeing few with W. So this PDF that you're looking at is based on HL7 version 2.7. We are not going through the training for one specific version. So whatever I have, whatever I'm going to teach is basically based on the generic HL7 version 2.x. So we may be quoting about 2.3 at times, 2.5 at times, or 2.7 at times. All right. So this is, but the specification that you're looking at and the document that you're looking at is based out of 2.7. Okay. Next, you have a field called or column called repeatability. This will tell you how many times a certain field or certain data element for that particular field can repeat. Okay, for example, we may have a field called phone number in PID segment. Phone number is something that can repeat, which means you can have multiple phone numbers, right? I may have my primary phone number, personal phone number, and some other phone number for office and so on, right? So there is a possibility of having multiple numbers. So such kind of fields will have repeatability as star. Here in this example, we are all seeing that there is only one. So a repeatability column will tell us whether we can repeat a certain field or not. If you have one, you are not supposed to repeat it. If you have star, you can go ahead and repeat it, right? For example, here you can see that in case if you talk about PID segment, you can see that for patient's phone number, we have the star, right? So if you have star, you can repeat that field. How do you repeat it and how do you show it in the HL7 message? We'll take a look at that once we come across each of these fields. Next, you have something called as table. So a few of the fields may be associated with a table. So in case if there is a table number, then we need to pick up the data from that table. So we'll take a look at that with real-time example as well. Then finally, you have the name of that particular field. So this is a general description of that name, which will help us to understand what kind of data can be transacted in a certain field. Okay. So we'll be going through this particular table for each of the segments. We'll say for all the segments that are there as part of ADT message, we'll explore what all fields are present in this tabular format. One other important thing, whatever you are seeing highlighted in the green here are the basic fields or the fields that we usually talk about during our real-time implementations. Every segment might have many number of fields and we don't need to, and it is impossible to remember every field, right? So someone was asking me the same question, do we need to remember everything? Apparently not. It is good to know at least the fields that are highlighted in green because those are the usual discussion points that usually we get to know or that usually comes up during our real-time project implementation sessions. Okay, so it's good if you learn or by heart the ones that are in green. So for every segment that we are going to go through, I have highlighted them. So just you can learn and memorize them at least. Do we need to learn all the segments? Not really. I will tell you what are the important segments that we need to memorize for sure, being an HL7 analyst. But I'm not going to say that right now because we may be biased towards only those segments. So after completing the HL7 part, I will tell you what are the important segments that we usually need to memorize for sure to attend the interviews and all. Okay. So we will conclude today's session here. Tomorrow, we'll continue exploring more about each segment. What are the fields that we have in a message segment? We'll begin with a message segment and we will completely go through all the rest of the segments that we have. Okay, so I'll open up for questions. Any questions from today's session?
Hey Dixon, I have one question. Okay,
Yeah, Jitendra, go
so
ahead.
this is for my curiousness. Okay, so
Mhm.
like when people start doing implementation, so do they refer this kind of document or like they remember everything by heart?
No, no one remembers everything. So
Okay.
basically, everyone refers these kind of specification documents to understand how do we build our HL7 message, what data should be put in what kind of field. Basically, we usually learn few things or memorize few things because when we be on calls, we may not get enough time to go ahead and refer the specification and say that, yes, this is where we are sending it. If the field is very rare, like someone says that I am sending this info in PID 30, absolutely no one would know what is there in PID 30. So if those are not common fields, then we will definitely go ahead and refer to the specification and then discuss more about that. But if it is a common field like If someone says, hey, you know what are you sending in PID5? You need to know what is in PID5 because it is nothing but the very common data element called patient name. So common things can be known, and it is no crime if you refer the specification and then talk about it or discuss more about that particular field.
Dixon, one question. What is the reference document that you suggest if you want to refer, which are the fields, like the most common reference document out there?
So basically, HL7 specification documents are available. Tomorrow I'll show you which website to look at, and you have standard HL7 documents as well. When you log into HL7 website and download the specification information, everyone can go ahead and log in to HL7 website and create an account for themselves and then download these specification documents. So that is the basic reference document. Yeah, let me complete. That is a basic reference document which we usually refer to for any specification related data. But for every implementation that you're working on, let's say you're working on a lab order implementation, every organization has their own specification document called as implementation guide. So in that implementation guide, they will have similar table, more or less similar table, which will tell you what data they are expecting in each of those fields. So that would be our reference guide to implement any interface.
For a standard HL7, like say we
Mhm.
are doing version 2.3, is there like a editor / document guide, like something like if you want to debug HL7 message Cs and you just put it, it would automatically parse thing and show? Because I've seen that on
Yes,
somebody's desk, but I don't know if what that tool is and if there's something that is quite
yes,
widely used in the market.
right. We have many tools of that kind. We have HL7 Soup, HL7 Spy, HL7 Inspector, Smart HL7 Viewer. So there are many tools. I'll show you tomorrow about Smart HL7 Viewer. Once we complete a message segment, we'll use that tool and break down the HL7 segment and take a look at it.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
So every organization has their own version of these reference documentations, right? So
Right.
is there are any updates coming from HL7 on specific version? Does it frequently happen, or once you got the reference document from HL7 for a specific version, it never changes?
Yes, it doesn't. So once a version is released, it is locked. So let's say you release, you have 2.5. So 2.5 is once it is released, it is locked and they don't make changes to 2.5. In case if they do, if they have specific patch kind of releases, they will release it as 2.5.1, 2.5.2, and so on. So, but not 2.5 again,
Okay,
right? That is how the release mechanism works, right?
right.
So once a release is published, they don't go ahead and change things within that particular release. If they do, they will release it as next higher number.
And that has to be part of our release implementation plan, right? If we are building out a dictionary to interpret
Mhm.
messages, we will just keep doing it according to the HL7 latest versions.
Right. So basically, what you're talking is called as profiling. We pick up the basic message structure that is provided by HL7 organization and create our own message structure from that. And it may be depending on one specific version. If you are moving to higher versions, then yes, you will take the new version, create your own message structure, and release a new implementation guide for yourself.
So for any, it's like I know that you were saying that if there is any field which is getting obsolete, right? In that
Mhm.
scenario, it will go to the backward compatibility for 2 releases, and after that, it will be like withdrawn, right?
Right.
So that even if it is in the entire HL7, if there's only one field happens to convert from backward to withdrawn, it has to be part of a new update in that particular release version cycle, right? 2.7
Correct.
something.
Correct. I
Okay.
mean, that is how it works. But usually new releases are released um, only if you have significant amount of changes. So apparently they move from one version to another after having many number of changes, not just one field or one component or
They
anything as
don't
such.
frequently do it, right? Like
Right, correct.
how happening in these current
Yes,
CI/CD platform where you don't wait
correct.
for.
No, we don't. Not
Okay.
that frequent. All right. Any more questions from anyone? Okay. So if you would like to, yeah,
Just a
yeah,
general
Farai.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, I'm just trying to learn. I know yesterday you said JavaScript is one of
Mm-hmm.
the things you cover
Mm-hmm.
with this class.
Mm-hmm.
But as we look for jobs towards the end of our class,
Mm-hmm.
what other programming language do you say will make us very competitive? Because right now it's a toss-up. I'm trying to see if I should revisit Java or I should stick with Python. It's getting confusing.
Mm-hmm.
What's making people competitive on the market as far as
To
learning another programming language, besides outside JavaScript, of course, because that's a given.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So JavaScript is basically required, as you said.
Uh,
So that is definitely a must for becoming an integration developer, because most of the integration engines use JavaScript for manipulating the HL7 message and build transformations and all. Whether you go to Rhapsody, whether you go to Mirth or other integration engines like Connector, apparently they will use some sort of scripting language, JavaScript being the primary choice. Apart from that, to become an integration developer, it purely depends on what integration engine that you are using. For example, if I'm using Mirth Connect is a Java-based application. So Mirth Connect gives you the flexibility to write Java code as well to some extent. So you leverage your Java knowledge for your real-time transformation buildings or anything as such. But specifically, do we really need to learn Java completely? No, not really. Uh, what makes you competitive? Uh, in integration space with FHIR being in place, I think the new front-end technologies like React Native or React JS or Angular will definitely give you an added additional edge if you are specifically getting into HL7 and FHIR implementation space.
you said React and Angular.
Yeah. So those are the
Okay.
frameworks which are again based on JavaScript itself. Those are front-end frameworks, which will help you to understand how to develop front-end using APIs, uh, especially FHIR-related APIs and all.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. I was actually way off because I was thinking it was either Python or Java, but now that you said React and Angular, and on the
Yeah,
fire,
so there
also
are
focused on.
apparently there are many use cases. So it purely depends on what kind of profile you are getting into, what kind of job you are getting into. Having Python is advantageous in certain use cases, specifically when there are data transaction or whenever there is a legacy data conversion from one database to a FHIR repository. Python really helps a lot in generating the files in the form of FHIR. Or if you're talking about moving data from one database to another, then SQL expertise will help you a lot. So it purely depends on what kind of role you are getting into. Um, so so now there is no one specific language which will give you an edge. But with FHIR, if you know front end, then the opportunity is a little better.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. But one suggestion there, if you can learn when you're learning one language, learn that one language perfectly. Replicating that to other languages is not a big deal. Once you know, let's say, if you're starting with JavaScripting, if you learn JavaScript is a full-fledged programming language. It started as a scripting language for the front-end systems, but uh, it has exploded as a complete programming language after 2009. So if you're learning JavaScript, if you can learn JavaScript completely, same concepts are present in, most of the languages are similar. It's just that the syntax and how you apply certain logic in other languages is different. But learning one language perfectly will give you very small learning curve to learn other languages. That's not a big deal. So, but don't learn multiple languages at the same time. You'll really get confused. Get perfect with one, and then you can get your hands on other languages later. That would be my
Okay.
suggestion.
So for the purpose of this class, I mean,
Mhm.
JavaScript is the one.
Yes, for the
to-
purpose of this integration class, we are going to take a look at JavaScript for sure, but that is very small section of JavaScript that we are going to learn. I am going to teach you only the things that are necessary for developing interfaces on Mirth Connect, but apparently JavaScript has a lot many other concepts. So I will suggest you a couple of websites and books that you can go through to improve your knowledge more on JavaScript beyond what we are going to learn in this training.
Okay. Yeah, if you could send that right away, that'd be helpful. Before I learn better before you teach it. I'd like to
Sure.
look ahead, study
Sure.
ahead. Yeah. So if you can send it, that would help.
Yep. I will send.
Thanks, Dixon. If you can do it on the group chat, that would be great. I will be
Yep.
also.
You have a website called javascript.info. So let me go ahead and. So I like this website. So if you look at javascript.info, this is a very good website. They have broken down every topic into specific events. So those will really help you to understand JavaScript in detail. So it starts from basics and it will go very detailed into each of the concepts and will explain everything in a very detailed manner.
Okay. No, this is good. Thank you.
And if you are a video viewer, then we have a YouTuber called Code with Mosh. You can, let me open that up 1 second. So he's a guy, I can share his YouTube channel with you guys.
Hi, my name is Mosh Hamadani.
So he explains from a perspective that if you're not a programmer, how to understand that particular concept. So he has few JavaScript related sessions on YouTube. You can definitely go through that to basically help you guys with understanding more about JavaScript in case if you're planning to learn more.
All right. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
So one important thing, if you guys are planning to go ahead and continue with the sessions, please reach out to Srinivas. You can drop your name and number in the chat so that Srinivas can reach out to you. I think Srinivas sir, are you there? I think mostly from tomorrow, people who are enrolled may be allowed, or I think tomorrow's session is also free, but from 4th session, you guys really need to enroll in order to continue with the training. So just a note there. So any other questions from anyone else? Okay, all right. I'm not hearing anything. So let's talk tomorrow. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. We'll catch up tomorrow morning at the same time. You all have a good day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.